I'm telling you this because I almost got on the bus. Not almost in the way people say, almost when they mean they thought about it. I mean my hand was on the handle. I mean the door was open, and the steps were right there, and the driver, whoever or whatever the driver was, had not said a word, but I could feel him waiting. I could feel the whole bus waiting, and I was about to step up. What stopped me was a phone call. My mother at 3:34 in the morning, calling me for no reason she could explain later, just a feeling she'd had in her sleep. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I looked down at the screen for maybe 2 seconds, and when I looked back up, the door was closing. My name is Holden Vaughn. I'm 39 years old. For 14 years, I drove long haul out of Paducah, Kentucky, hauling dry freight on a regular route between Nashville and St. Louis. I don't drive that route anymore. I don't drive any route. I haven't been in a truck since the night I'm about to tell you about. I'm making this recording because 6 months ago, my little brother Denny died of an overdose in the trailer he was renting behind our mother's house in Calvert City. And I was the one who found him, and everything that happened after that night at the rest stop in Eddyville has to do with Denny, all of it. If drive long haul, if you run I-24 between Paducah and Nashville, or I-57 up through southern Illinois, or any of those lonely stretches of western Kentucky highway where the towns thin out and the radio goes to static and the only lights for miles are sodium lamps over empty truck stops. If you run those routes on the overnight leg, then sooner or later you are going to see the bus. It's a red coach. Old, 60s or 70s, the kind they used to run on the big interstate lines before Greyhound retired them. The paint is faded to the color of dried blood. The destination placard above the windshield only ever says one word: home. The bus appears at 3:33 a.m., always 3:33, never a minute off. It pulls up in places no bus should be pulling up: closed stops, abandoned way stations, empty truck lots at 3 in the morning. The interior lights are always on. You can always see inside. And inside, sometimes, if you've recently lost somebody, you will see them sitting in one of the seats, looking out the window at you. There is one rule: you never get on. I'm going to tell you how I almost broke it. I'm going to tell you what I saw in the windows over the 11 nights it followed me up and down my route. I'm going to tell you what I think the bus is, and what I think home means, and why I think my brother is still on it. And then I'm going to tell you why I still, some nights, hear an engine in the distance at 3:33 in the morning and have to lock my bedroom door to keep myself from walking out to the road. Let me start with Denny. Denny was my little brother by 12 years. Our father left when I was 10, and Denny was still an infant. So I was the one who taught him how to throw a baseball, how to tie his shoes, how to drive stick in the parking lot of the old Kmart off Route 60. Our mother worked 2 jobs: cafeteria lady at Calvert City Elementary in the mornings, cashier at the EGA in the evenings, so most of the raising of Denny, the day-to-day raising, fell to me. I didn't mind it. I was a big brother who liked being a big brother. Denny was a good kid, quiet, curious, liked to draw. In middle school, he got obsessed with maps. Would spend hours tracing the back roads of Marshall County onto notebook paper, naming them himself when the real names were boring. He was going to be somebody. I was sure of it. He graduated high school in 2014. He got a scholarship to Murray State for graphic design. He went for 3 semesters. Then he came home one Thanksgiving break, and he didn't go back. He said he didn't feel right. He said he couldn't sleep. He said his thoughts were too loud. Our mother took him to a doctor in Paducah who prescribed him something for anxiety, and the doctor told her to watch him because the pills could be habit-forming. They were. By the following spring, Denny was getting them from somewhere besides the pharmacy, and by the spring after that, he had moved from pills to what was cheaper and easier to find, which, in Western Kentucky in 2017, was pretty much whatever you wanted. I want to say that. I tried the way you try with family. I drove home on my weeks off. I sat with him. I took him to meetings. I loaned him money I knew wasn't going to come back. I loaned him money I pretended I thought was going to come back. I yelled at him twice, which I regret. I cried with him 3 or 4 times, which I don't regret. I stopped yelling after the 3rd time, because yelling didn't do anything except make him smaller, and I didn't want him any smaller than he already was. He got clean in 2021, 9 months. We all thought that was going to be the one. He started drawing again. He talked about going back to school. He relapsed in 2022, got clean again, relapsed. Got clean again, relapsed. The last time I saw him alive was September 14th. I stopped at Mom's house on my way back from a Nashville run, and Denny was out in the trailer, the little 30-foot travel trailer Mom had bought off her cousin and set up behind the house because Denny kept getting into it with her inside, and they both needed a little space. He was sitting on the step of the trailer, smoking a cigarette. He looked thin. He looked tired, but he smiled when he saw me, and he got up and hugged me, and he told me he was doing okay. He said he was going to start going to meetings again next week. I told him I loved him. He told me he loved me back. I got in the truck and I drove to Paducah. 5 days later, my mother called me at 11:30 in the morning, and she was crying so hard. I couldn't understand her for almost a full minute. And when I finally understood her, I got in my pickup and I drove the 90 miles to Calvert City in just over an hour, and I was the one who had to go out to the trailer because Mom couldn't make herself go back out there. And I found Denny in the little bed at the back of the trailer, and he had been dead for probably 12 hours. I'm not going to describe it. I'm just going to say that I sat with him until the coroner got there, which was another 40 minutes, and then I sat with my mother until midnight. And then I drove back to my apartment in Paducah, and I did not sleep. I did not sleep for 3 nights. On the 4th night, I went back to work. I knew I shouldn't have been driving. Any trucker who tells you he's fit to drive 72 hours after burying his little brother is lying to you or lying to himself. But I couldn't stay at Mom's house because she kept looking at me like I was Denny, and I couldn't stay at my apartment because my apartment was the place where I had been when Denny died, and the only place I could think of being was in a truck on a road at night with the radio on and the kept dark and the lane markers coming at me one after another in a rhythm my body understood. My dispatcher at Wilcox Freight was a woman named Barb. I'd worked with Barb for 9 years. When I called her on the morning of the fourth day and told her I wanted to run, she said, "Holden, you sure?" And she was quiet for a second. And then she said, "I got a Nashville to St. Louis run that's been sitting. It's yours if you want it. But you call me if you need to pull over." I picked up the trailer at the Nashville yard at 6 in the evening. Dry freight, paper products, I think, or maybe boxed cereal, I don't remember. I got on I-24 North at 7. The sun was setting behind me. I drove through the Tennessee hills in that long gold light that comes in late September, and I put an old Willie Nelson album on. And for about an hour, I felt like I remembered how to be a person. Then full dark came. I hit the Kentucky line around 9, Clarksville, Hopkinsville, on through Cadiz. By 1 in the morning, I was coming up on Eddyville, which is a little town in Lyon County, Kentucky, built up on Lake Barkley. There's a rest stop just south of Eddyville on the westbound side of I-24. It's been closed since around 2019, I want to say, when the state cut its rest stop budget. The lot is still there. The building's boarded up. The exit ramp is still open, though, and sometimes in bad weather, I'd pull in there and sleep an hour because it was empty and quiet, and there were still streetlights running on the solar panels the state had put up before they abandoned it. I wasn't planning to stop that night. I was making good time. But somewhere around Cadiz, I started feeling it, that heavy thing that comes down on you when you've been pretending for too long. And by the time I saw the sign for the Eddyville rest stop, I knew I wasn't going to make it all the way to Paducah without pulling over. I took the exit. I pulled into the lot. I shut the engine off. It was 3:29 a.m. I sat in the cab for a minute with my hands on the wheel. The lot was empty. One other truck at the far end, lights off, driver probably asleep. The boarded-up building in the middle of the lot was dark. The solar streetlights buzzed overhead in that faint, high-pitched way those things do. A moth was going around the nearest one. I leaned back in my seat. I closed my eyes. I didn't intend to sleep. I just wanted to stop for a minute. I opened my eyes again, and I heard the engine. It was a diesel, a big one, the kind of sound a coach bus makes when it's idling heavy. The sound was coming from the entrance to the lot, from the direction of the ramp. I looked at the clock on my dash. It was 3:33 a.m. The bus came around the curve of the access road and rolled into the lot at maybe 10 miles an hour. A big old coach. I've worked around transportation my whole adult life, and I recognized it right away as a GM PD 4107 Buffalo, late 60s model, one of the old long-distance coaches that Greyhound and Trailways used to run before the MCI models took over in the late 70s. It was painted red. Not a bright red, a dark red, the color of an old barn that hasn't been repainted in 30 years. The paint was peeling in places. The windows were clean. The destination placard above the windshield was illuminated from inside. It said home. That was the only word on it. No route number, no city, just home. In white letters on a black background, the old-style rolling placard that you'd crank by hand from the driver's seat. The bus pulled in along the curb in front of the boarded-up building, about 40 feet from where my truck was parked. It stopped. The air brakes hissed. The engine kept running. I sat in my cab and I watched. Nobody got out. The interior lights of the bus were on. bright enough that I could see the seats. The windows weren't tinted. They were the old, clear glass you'd find on a buffalo coach. I could see down the whole length of the bus from where I was sitting. It was empty, every seat. Nobody in the driver's seat either, as far as I could tell. The angle was wrong. I couldn't see the driver directly, but there was no silhouette, no movement, no shape of a person at the wheel. The bus sat there for a long time. 2 minutes, 3. The engine rumbled. The destination placard stayed lit. I stayed in my cab with my hands on the wheel and I didn't move. Then the door opened. I mean the passenger door. The front door, the bifold one you climb up into a bus through. It opened with that soft pneumatic sound those doors make. It stayed open. Nothing else happened. Nobody got out. Nobody was there to get out. I understood, sitting in my truck, that the door had opened for me. I don't know how I knew. I just knew. The way you know when somebody across a room is looking at you, even though you haven't looked up. The bus had pulled in. The bus had stopped. The bus had opened its door, and the opening was for me. I was being invited. I was being asked. I sat there with my hand on the key in the ignition, and I thought, and this is the part I can't fully explain, even now. I thought about getting out of my truck and walking across the lot and getting on the bus. I thought about it seriously, not as a crazy thought, as a real thought. I thought about how tired I was. I thought about Denny in the trailer. I thought about my mother's face. I thought about how long the drive to Paducah still was, and how long my life still was after that drive, and how I wasn't sure I wanted to do either one. The bus waited. The door stayed open. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been 30 seconds. It could have been 5 minutes. I remember that the moth around the streetlight had stopped moving, was just hanging in the air, not beating its wings, which isn't something a moth can do. I remember that the other truck at the far end of the lot had its lights off and its curtains closed, and I knew, somehow, that whoever was in that truck was not going to wake up until the bus was gone. I remember that my hand was no longer on the key. My hand was on the door handle of my cab. I had started to open the door. I didn't remember deciding to. That's when I saw him. He was in the third window back on the driver's side of the bus. He hadn't been there a second ago. I had been watching the whole bus and there had been no one in it. But now there was somebody in the third window back, sitting in the aisle seat, turned slightly toward the window so I could see his face. It was Denny. It was Denny, exactly the way he had looked on September 14th, the last time I saw him alive. Same jean jacket, same faded Murray State hoodie underneath it, same thin face, same tired eyes, same long hair pushed behind his ears. He was looking at me through the glass. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't beckoning. He was just looking at me. Steady, the way he used to look at me when he was waiting for me to figure something out. My hand was on the door handle of the cab. I had already pushed it halfway down. I don't know what I would have done. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. It buzzed once, loud in the quiet of the cab, and I looked down at it reflexively. A trucker's reflex, you always check the phone. Could be dispatch, could be an emergency, and the screen said Mom. It was 3:34 a.m. My mother has not called me at 3:34 a.m. in my entire adult life. I stared at the screen for maybe 2 seconds. Then I looked back up at the bus. The door was closing. The bifold door was folding inward, slow, like somebody was letting it close rather than closing it themselves. Denny was still in the third window back. His expression hadn't changed. I let go of the cab door handle. I picked up my phone. My mother said, "Holden, honey, are you okay?" I don't know why I'm calling. I just woke up and I had the worst feeling. "Are you okay?" I tried to answer her. My throat wouldn't work. I made a sound that wasn't a word. Outside the cab, the bus's air brakes released. The engine pitch changed. The bus started to roll forward, slow at first, then picking up speed as it moved toward the exit ramp on the far side of the lot. I watched it the whole way. I watched the third window back. Denny was still sitting there, and as the bus started to move, he raised his hand, just a little, and put it flat against the glass. Then the bus went around the curve of the exit ramp, and it was gone. My mother was saying my name on the phone. "Holden, Holden, honey, are you there? Holden, say something," I said. "I'm here, Mom. I'm here. I'm okay. I'm sorry. I'm okay. I'll call you back." I hung up. I sat in the cab with my hand over my mouth and I cried for a long time. When I looked at the clock again, it was 4:02 a.m. The lot was empty. The solar street light was buzzing the way it had been buzzing before. The moth was moving again. I started the truck. I drove to Paducah. I did not tell anybody what I had seen. Not yet. I didn't sleep when I got back to Paducah. I got to my apartment around 6:30 and in the morning, I sat on the edge of my bed with my boots still on, and I watched the sun come up through the blinds. Around 9, I called my mother back. I told her I was fine. I told her I had probably just been tired, and she had probably just had a bad dream. She accepted that. She didn't push. My mother has the sense to know when a son is lying to her for a reason, and she let me have the lie. I called Barb at Wilcox Freight that afternoon, and I told her I wanted to run again. She hesitated. She said, "Holden, you don't have to. You've got bereavement leave stacked up." I told her I couldn't sit still. I told her the driving was the only thing that was helping. She gave me another Nashville run. 2 days later, I spent those 2 days trying to convince myself I had hallucinated the bus. I was grieving. I hadn't slept in 4 days. I'd been running on caffeine and adrenaline. I had looked at the third window back, and my brain, which was starving for Denny, had put Denny there. That was what I told myself. That was what I kept telling myself. It almost worked. By the afternoon of the second day, I had almost convinced myself. Then I went out to the parking lot of my apartment complex to get something out of my pickup, and I noticed that the back of my hand had a bruise on it. A thin, dark bruise running across the knuckles of my right hand in the exact shape of the grip on my truck's door handle. I had been holding that handle so hard for so long in the cab at Eddyville that I had bruised myself against it. I hadn't hallucinated. Not that. I took the Nashville run 2 nights later. I made good time down. I dropped the trailer at the yard at a little after 10. In the evening, I picked up the return load, automotive parts, heavy, and I got back on I-24, heading north around 11:15. I was not going to stop at Eddyville. I had already decided. I'd filled up on coffee in Nashville. I had jerky and water in the cab. I was going to drive straight through to Paducah without pulling over for anything. I made it as far as Cadiz. There's a truck plaza on the south side of Cadiz, a big one, the kind with a fueling island and a diner and a little motel attached. It was crowded that night, 30 or 40 trucks in the lot, lights on in the diner, people moving around. It was 2:45 a.m. when I pulled in. I was going to fuel up, use the bathroom, and keep moving. I fueled up. I used the bathroom. I got a coffee from the diner. I got back in my truck. I sat in the cab with the coffee in my hand, and I could not make myself turn the key. I don't know why. I wasn't thinking about the bus. I wasn't consciously afraid. I was just sitting there, watching the other drivers come and go, watching the pumps, watching the diner. I told myself I was letting the coffee cool down. I told myself I was going to leave in just a minute. I looked at the clock. It was 3:30 a.m. I thought, okay, Holden, you have 3 minutes. If you don't start this truck in the next 3 minutes, you are going to see it again. I didn't start the truck. At 3:33 a.m., a red coach bus pulled off I-24 and came down the long entrance road into the truck plaza lot. It passed right by the fueling island. 4 drivers were standing at the pumps. None of them looked up. None of them noticed. A woman was walking from the diner back to her tractor with a to-go cup, and the bus rolled past her, close enough to read her t-shirt, and she did not see it. The bus came around the back row of parked trucks, and it pulled into the empty slot directly across from where I was parked. It stopped. The air brakes hissed. The engine kept running. The destination placard said home. I was maybe 30 feet from it. I sat in my cab with my hands flat on my thighs. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. I could feel the coffee shaking in the cup in the holder next to me. I did not look at the windows of the bus. I stared at the dashboard of my truck. I counted the dials. I counted them again. The door of the bus opened, the same pneumatic hiss. I heard footsteps. I don't know how to describe it except to say that the footsteps were on gravel, and they were walking, and they were coming across the lot toward my truck. Slow, steady, unhurried. Boots on loose stones, getting closer. I kept my eyes on the dashboard. I did not look up. I did not look at the window. I did not look at the mirrors. The footsteps stopped right outside my driver's side door. Nothing happened for maybe 10 seconds. No knock, no voice, nothing. Just the sense, and I will tell you, whoever you are listening to this, that the sense of another presence standing outside the cab of a truck in the middle of the night is a physical thing. It is not your imagination. You can feel the weight of it, just the sense of somebody standing right there on the other side of the door, waiting for me to turn my head. I didn't turn my head. I thought about Denny. I thought about my mother. I thought about the bruise on my hand. I thought, he is not out there. He is on the bus. What is out there is something else. And if I look at it, it will have a face. And if it has a face, I will get out of the truck. I kept my eyes on the dashboard. After a while, I don't know how long, 30 seconds, a minute, the footsteps started moving again. Away from my truck this time. Back across the gravel, I heard them reach the bus. I heard them climb the bifold steps. I heard the door hiss closed. Then the engine pitch changed, and the air brakes released, and the bus rolled out of the slot and back down the entrance road and out onto I-24, heading north. When I looked up, it was 3:41 a.m. I sat in the truck plaza until dawn. I did not start the engine. I did not drink the coffee. I watched drivers come and go, maybe a dozen of them over the next 2 hours, and I saw over and over the same thing I had seen the first time. None of them noticed anything. None of them looked toward the slot where the bus had parked. When a woman pulled her rig into that exact slot around 5 in the morning, she parked it without any hesitation, like nothing had happened there. The bus had been in the world and not in the world at the same time. I drove to Paducah at sunrise. I pulled into a diner in Princeton on the way, and I ate breakfast because I needed to be around other people. I ordered eggs and I didn't eat them. The waitress asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I paid my bill and I drove home. That afternoon, I drove to the Flying J truck stop at Exit 3 off I-24 in Paducah, and I went looking for Ward Meacham. Ward Meacham was a legend at the Paducah Flying J. He was 73 years old, had been driving long haul since 1972, had finally retired his rig 2 years ago, and now spent most of his days sitting at the back booth of the diner, drinking black coffee and talking to whatever driver wanted to hear a story. He knew every road in the Ohio Valley. He knew every trucker who'd run the region for more than a decade. He knew every piece of road lore from Cairo, Illinois to Bristol, Tennessee. He was also the only man I'd ever personally heard mention the red bus. It had been maybe 2 years ago. I'd been at the counter at the Flying J Diner, half listening to Ward at the back booth, talking to a younger driver. Ward had been telling stories about weird things he'd seen on the road. The usual trucker stuff, hitchhikers who vanished, lights in the sky near Fort Campbell, a stretch of Highway 60 near Smithland, where his radio always cut to a preacher no station carried. And then he'd said something I'd barely registered at the time. He'd said, "And then there's the red bus, but I don't talk about the red bus." The younger driver had asked what that was, and Ward had just shaken his head and said, "You'll know it if you see it, and if you see it, you don't get on." That was all. He'd changed the subject. I'd thought he was being colorful. I walked into the Flying J Diner that afternoon around 4. Ward was in his booth. He had a coffee and a newspaper. I got a coffee of my own, and I walked over. I said, "Ward, you got a minute?" He looked up at me. His eyes were that pale, washed-out blue you see on old men who've spent 50 years staring at horizons. He looked at my face for a long moment, and then he set his paper down and he said, "Sit down, son." I sat down across from him. He said, "You've seen it." I hadn't said anything yet. I hadn't said the words red bus. I hadn't said the words 3:33 a.m. I had just sat down across from him, and he had looked at my face, and he had known. I said, "Yes." He said, "Who'd you lose?" I told him about Denny. I told him the short version. Brother overdosed September 14th. I was the one who found him. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I was done, he nodded slowly and took a drink of his coffee. He said, "It'll be him you saw on the bus. It's always someone you lost recent. 6 months is about the window, from what I've heard." I said, "You've heard. From who?" Ward leaned back in the booth. He looked at the ceiling for a second, like he was trying to decide how much to tell me. He said, "Holden, the red bus has been on these roads as long as I've been driving. Longer. I first heard about it in 1974 from a driver named Earl Likens out of Evansville who'd seen it twice, Earl said he'd heard about it from his father, who'd been a Greyhound driver in the 40s. Far as I can tell, it's been appearing at 3:33 in the morning on the long-haul routes through western Kentucky and southern Illinois for at least 80 years. Maybe longer. Nobody knows where it started. Nobody knows what it is. There are stories, but the stories contradict each other. Every driver who's seen it has a slightly different theory. He took another drink of coffee. He said, "The things that stay consistent are these. It appears at 3:33 a.m. It only appears to people who've recently lost somebody close. The destination placard always says home. The inside is always empty except for the person you lost, and they're always in one of the first few windows back from the front. Sometimes they're on the driver's side, sometimes the passenger side. The door opens. That's the invitation. The rule is you never get on." I said, What happens if you get on?" Ward looked at me for a long time. He said, "You don't come back. The truck is found in the rest stop with the keys in it. Sometimes the engine is still running. The driver is gone. No body, no sign, no trail. It's been marked down as a suicide, or a walk-off, or a missing persons case every time. And the state police don't connect them because they happen years apart in different counties, and because nobody, in an official capacity, has ever heard of the red bus." I said, "How many?" He said, "I know of 11 in my lifetime. That's just the ones I've heard about. I expect there's more. A lot more if you count the decades before I started driving." I sat there for a while. I drank my coffee. Ward drank his. Neither of us said anything for maybe 2 minutes. Then Ward said, "Holden, I'm going to tell you something I don't tell every driver who comes to me about this. I'm going to tell you because you've got the look on you, and I don't want to have to hear in 6 months that you're the 12th one I know of." I said, "Okay," he said. "I saw it myself in 1983. I was 31 years old. My wife, Darlene, had died the year before. Breast cancer, 30 years old, 2 little boys at home. I was hauling out of Louisville to Nashville on I-65, and I pulled into a rest stop near Elizabethtown at 3:30 in the morning. The bus came in at 3:33, the way it always does. Darlene was in the second window back on the passenger side. She was wearing the blue dress I'd buried her in. She was looking at me, and she was smiling." Ward's voice did not change. He did not get choked up. He told it the way a man tells a story he has told himself in his own head for 40 years. He said, "I got out of my truck. I walked across the lot. I put my foot on the first step of the bus. That's as close as I came. The reason I didn't go up the second step is because my older boy, who was 6 years old at the time, had given me a picture he had drawn of our family, and I had it folded in my wallet. And when I put my foot on the bus step, the picture fell out of my wallet. I don't know how. The wallet was in my back pocket. It shouldn't have fallen out, and it landed on the ground next to my boot. And I looked down at it, and I saw my 2 boys in the picture, and I took my foot off the bus. Darlene watched me take my foot off. She did not look angry. She did not look sad. She just nodded at me, like she understood, like she had known all along what I was going to choose. The door closed and the bus drove away, and I stood in that rest, stop holding a crayon drawing of my family for a long time before I could make myself get back in the truck. Ward looked at me across the booth, He said, "Holden, what stopped you the first time?" I told him about my mother's phone call. He nodded slowly. He said, "There's always something small. The bus asks you a question, and the world, if you're lucky, gives you an answer. But here's what I need to tell you, son. The bus is coming back. You've seen it twice now. It will come a third time and a fourth, and every time you see it, the pull gets stronger. The ones I know who got on, they all saw it more than once. Every single one. The first time you can almost dismiss. By the fifth, sixth, seventh time, you start to think maybe the bus is right. You start to think maybe home is exactly where you should be going." He leaned forward. "You need to make a decision about how you're going to fight this, and you need to make it now, before you see it a third time. Because after the third time, Holden, the thing you have to fight is not the bus. The thing you have to fight is yourself." I drove home from the Flying J, and I sat at my kitchen table for the rest of the afternoon, and I made a list. I made a list of the things in my life that I still cared about. I made it because Ward had told me to, and because Ward had told me that was what had saved him. It hadn't been the crayon drawing, exactly. It had been what the crayon drawing had made him remember. My list was short. I'm not going to pretend it was a long list. 6 months of grieving your brother does not leave you with a long list. But it wasn't empty. My mother was on the list. She was at the top. She was 64 years old. She had just lost her youngest son. And if she lost me too, I did not think she would live out the year. I wrote her name down and I underlined it. My sister Trina was on the list. Older than me by 2 years, married, lived in Indianapolis with her husband and her 2 girls. We had never been close the way Denny and I were close, but she was my sister. And she was still alive, and she mattered. My dog was on the list. Her name was Biscuit. She was a 12-year-old beagle mix I had adopted from a shelter in Paducah when she was 3. She was old now. She slept most of the day. She would not outlive me if I made the right choices. That was it. That was my whole list. 3 names. I wrote it on a piece of notebook paper. I folded it 3 times. I put it in my wallet in the main pocket, behind my driver's license. Then I did something else Ward had told me to do. He had said that if the bus came a third time, I needed to have a physical object on me that would remind me why I was staying. Something I could touch, something I could see. I went out to my truck and I got the little framed picture that had been on my dashboard for the last 6 years. A photograph of Denny and me on a fishing trip to Kentucky Lake in 2019, back when he had been clean for the 2nd time, back when he had still been somebody I thought was going to make it. I took the picture out of the frame. I flipped it over and I wrote on the back in ballpoint pen, "Stay for the ones who are still here." I folded it once and I put it in my wallet behind the list. I sat at my kitchen table and I looked at my hands and I thought about what Ward had said, about how by the 5th or 6th time you start to think maybe the bus is right. I understood what he meant. Because even then, even after 2 sightings, even after everything he had told me, part of me was already thinking about Denny in the 3rd window back, with his hand flat against the glass. Part of me was already wondering what home looked like from the inside. I took the Nashville run again 2 nights later. The 3rd time was different. The first 2 times, The bus had found me at rest stops, places where I was already stopped, places where I had, in some small way, chosen to be still. The third time the bus came for me while I was still driving. It was the night of October 3rd. I was northbound on I-24 between Hopkinsville and Cadiz, about 18 miles south of the Eddyville exit. It was 3:21 a.m. I was doing 65 in the right lane with my cruise control on. The road was empty. I hadn't seen another vehicle in either direction for probably 15 minutes. There was a low fog sitting in the bottomland on either side of the interstate, the way it does on cool fall nights in western Kentucky when the ground is still warm from the day. I saw headlights in my passenger side mirror. They were coming up fast. I checked my speedometer. I was steady at 65, and the headlights were closing on me at what must have been 80, maybe 85. I moved a little further right to give whoever it was room to pass. The headlights pulled alongside me in the left lane. It was the bus. It was moving next to me at my exact speed. I could see it in my mirror and in my peripheral vision through the driver's side window. The same faded red paint, the same home placard lit up above the windshield. The interior lights were on. It was matching my speed, lane for lane, with about 4 feet of empty asphalt between its right side and my left side. I did not look at its windows. I did not look. I kept my eyes on the road ahead of me, and my hands at 10 and 2, and I reminded myself of what Ward had told me. After the third time, the thing you have to fight is yourself. My dashboard clock said 3:22. It was 11 minutes to 3:33. The bus stayed beside me. I tried to speed up. I pushed the accelerator down, and my truck climbed to 70, 72, 75. The bus matched me without changing pitch. I could hear its engine next to me, steady, the same note, like whatever was driving it did not care about mechanical limits. I tried to slow down. I came off the accelerator and let the truck drop to 55. The bus slowed with me. Still 4 feet of space between us. Still the same steady note in its engine. I understood then that the bus was going to be with me at 3:33, whether I wanted it to be or not, and that the only thing I got to choose was whether I was going to be at a rest stop or in a moving truck on the interstate when the time came. I looked at my fuel gauge, 3/4 full, plenty of road left in me. I decided I was going to stay on the interstate. I decided I was going to keep driving, straight through. Do not stop, do not pull over, do not even look at the bus until the sun came up. The dashboard clock said 3:28. I reached into my back pocket and I took out my wallet and I set it on the seat next to me with the list and the photograph folded behind the driver's license. I didn't open it. I just wanted it where I could touch it. At 3:31, the bus's turn signal came on. The right one. I watched it in my peripheral vision. The little amber light at the front corner of the bus, flashing steady once per second, the way a turn signal does, telling me the bus was going to move into my lane. There was no other lane for me to move into. I was already in the right lane. To my right was the fog line and the gravel shoulder and the ditch. The bus started drifting over. I hit the brakes, hard. Not a panic stop, a hard, controlled stop, the kind you practice for. My truck came down from 50 to 20 to 10, and the bus slid past me in the left lane, not ersting, just continuing on. Its turn signal went off. It kept going north on I-24 at its steady 85 miles an hour, and I watched its taillights get smaller in the fog ahead of me. And at 3:33 a.m. exactly, its brake lights flared once, bright red, and then it was gone around a curve. I stopped on the shoulder. I put the truck in park. I turned on my hazards. I sat in the cab with my hands on the wheel, and I breathed. I breathed for a long time. My phone did not ring. My mother was asleep in Calvert City, and there was no reason she should have woken up and called me, and she didn't. I was alone with it this time. After a while, I got out of the truck. I walked to the back of the trailer, and I stood on the shoulder, and I looked north along the interstate where the bus had gone. The fog had lifted. I could see the road clear for a mile ahead. The road was empty, no taillights, no bus, nothing. But lying on the shoulder about 10 feet from where I was standing in the gravel was a photograph. It was an old photograph, faded, a Polaroid with the square white border around it. It was face down. I walked over and I picked it up and I turned it over. It was a picture of a truck plaza at night. The Cadiz Truck Plaza, the one I had sat in 4 nights ago. The picture was taken from the angle of the red bus's open door, looking across the lot toward a red Peterbilt tractor with a white Wilcox freight trailer. Hooked to it, my truck, my trailer. In the window of the cab, a face, looking out, looking at whoever had taken the picture, my face. There was writing on the white border below the image, in black ballpoint pen, a man's handwriting. I did not recognize it. It said, "He looked at us, Denny." He almost came. Next time, he will. I put the photograph in my coat pocket. I got back in the truck. I drove to Paducah. The sun was up by the time I got home. I did not stop driving until I was in my own parking lot. I spent the next week not driving. I called Barb at Wilcox Freight, and I told her I was taking some of that bereavement leave she had offered me. She said, "Good." She said I should have taken it weeks ago. She didn't ask why I'd changed my mind. I did 3 things that week. The first thing I did was drive down to Calvert City, and I sat with my mother for 2 days. I didn't tell her about the bus. I couldn't. But I watched her. I watched her make coffee and feed her cat and water the plants on her porch, and I memorized the way she did each of those things, because I was building up a library of reasons to stay. And the library needed to be bigger than 3 names on a folded piece of paper. She knew something was wrong. She didn't ask. That's one of the good things about my mother. She lets people tell her when they're ready. On the second night, I sat on the porch with her after dinner, and she said, without looking at me, "Holden, whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone." "I'm here," I said. "I know, Mom," she said. "Your brother thought he had to carry it alone. That's what killed him, not the drugs. The drugs were just what he reached for." I didn't answer. I just put my hand on top of hers on the arm of her chair. And we sat that way for a while, and I added that moment to the library. The second thing I did that week was drive to the main branch of the McCracken County Public Library in Paducah, and I sat at one of their microfilm terminals for 2 full days, and I went through the archives of the Paducah Sun and the Lyon County Herald Ledger and the Cadiz Record looking for something specific. I was looking for long-haul truckers who had gone missing in western Kentucky over the last 50 years. Trucks found abandoned at rest stops. Keys in the ignition. Drivers vanished, no trail. I found 11 of them. The oldest was from 1974. A driver named Earl Mackin, 44 years old, out of Evansville, hauling steel for a company that didn't exist anymore. His rig had been found at a rest stop on Highway 62 near Kutawa, engine running, driver's door open, his lunch half-eaten on the console. No trace of him. The most recent was from March of this year. 7 months ago, a driver named Lorena Brace, 51 years old, out of Mount Vernon, Illinois, hauling lumber. Her rig was found at the closed rest stop at Eddyville, the same rest stop where I'd seen the bus the first time. Her keys were in the ignition. Her purse was still on the passenger seat. A coffee in the cup holder was still warm when the state trooper found the truck at 6:15 in the morning. 9 men and 2 women over 50 years, all long-haul drivers, all on routes through western Kentucky and southern Illinois. All vanished from rest stops or truck plazas between 3 and 4 in the morning. Every one of them had lost someone close in the 6 months before they disappeared. That last detail wasn't in the newspaper articles. I couldn't get that from microfilm, but Ward Meacham had told me it the next time I sat with him at the Flying J. He had known about 8 of the 11 personally. He had known their stories. He had known Lorena Brace. He had known her husband had died of lung cancer the previous September. The third thing I did that week was try to photograph the road signs on a stretch of Highway 62 between Eddyville and Kutawa, where 3 of the 11 disappearances had happened. I drove out there on the afternoon of October 8th. I had a road atlas with me, the big Rand McNally kind, and I had pulled up Google Maps on my phone. And I had a notepad. I wanted to map out the exact stretch of road where the drivers had vanished. Highway 62 between Eddyville and Kutawa is maybe 7 miles long. It runs along the north shore of Lake Barkley, crosses the Cumberland River on the Egner's Ferry Bridge, and winds through some empty country before it gets to Kutawa. I drove it slow. I stopped every mile or so. I took pictures of road signs with my phone. I marked on the atlas where each of the 3 trucks had been found. When I got to the midpoint of the stretch, about 3.5 miles out of Eddyville, in a low stretch of woods, I noticed something odd. There was an exit, a small, unnumbered exit, going off to the right, onto a narrow paved road that disappeared into the trees. There was a street sign at the mouth of the exit, one of those green county signs with white letters. The sign said, "Howl Hollow Ard." I pulled over onto the shoulder of Highway 62, just past the exit. I checked my atlas. There was no Howl Hollow Road on the map. I checked Google Maps on my phone. No Howl Hollow Road. I drove a 1/4 mile past the exit, turned around, came back. The exit was there. The sign was there. I got out of my truck. I walked up to the sign. I touched it. It was real. The metal was cold. The paint was faded. The sign had been there for a long time. I took a photograph of it with my phone. I heard the shutter sound. I looked at the screen. The photograph was of Highway 62. Just the highway. No sign, no exit. Just trees. I looked up. The sign was still there. The exit was still there. I was still standing next to it. I took another photograph. Blank. Just the highway. I did not drive down Howl Hollow Road. I wanted to. I want to be honest about that. I wanted to see where it went. Part of me thought maybe, if I followed it, I would find whatever the red bus was, the place where it came from, the place where it took people. Part of me thought I might find Denny there, sitting on a porch, waiting. But I remembered what Ward had said. After the third time, the thing you have to fight is yourself. I got back in my truck. I drove past the exit. I drove straight through to Kutawa without stopping. I did not look in my mirrors. When I got to Kutawa, I stopped at a gas station and I sat in the parking lot, and I took the photograph out of my coat pocket, the one the bus had left for me on the interstate, and I looked at it. Again, he looked at us, Denny. He almost came. Next time he will. It was not the bus talking. That was what I understood. Sitting in that gas station parking lot in Kutawa. The bus was not the voice on the photograph. The bus was the vehicle. The vehicle was being driven by somebody, and the somebody was writing to Denny, or about Denny, or through Denny. I did not know which yet. But I understood that whoever was driving the bus had wanted me to come, and whoever was driving the bus was going to keep trying. Between October 8th and October 22nd, I saw the bus 4 more times. I am not going to describe each sighting in full. By the 5th sighting, I had started to lose the ability to tell them apart from each other. The bus came at 3:33 a.m. every few nights, sometimes at a rest stop, sometimes alongside me on the interstate, once in the parking lot of a motel in Marion, Illinois, where I had pulled off to sleep for a few hours. Every time it was the same coach. Every time the destination placard said home. Every time the door opened. What changed from sighting to sighting was who was inside. The 4th sighting was at a Love's truck stop outside Mount Vernon, Illinois. The bus pulled into the far end of the lot at 3:33. I watched it from my cab. Through the 3rd window back on the driver's side, I saw Denny. Same jean jacket, same hoodie, same steady expression. But in the window behind him, the 4th window back, I saw someone else. A woman, 50-something, brown hair. She was wearing a yellow windbreaker, and she was holding a styrofoam coffee cup. I didn't recognize her. I looked her up later. Lorena Brace, the driver who had vanished at Eddyville in March. The newspaper photo I'd pulled from microfilm showed her in the same yellow windbreaker. The 5th sighting was on I-57 near Marion. The 6th was at the same Eddyville rest stop where I'd seen it the first time. The 7th was at a Pilot in Paducah, my home truck stop, the one I'd used for 9 years. That one shook me the most, because it meant the bus knew where I lived. By the 7th sighting, I had started recognizing more faces. In the 5th window back, on the passenger side, I saw an old man in a fisherman's cap. I looked him up. Earl Mackin, the 1974 driver from Evansville. In the 6th window back, I saw a young man in a mechanic's shirt with a name patch. I couldn't read the name through the window, but I matched the face to a news photo. Trey Osterman, 29 years old, vanished from a rest stop on I-24 in 2003. The bus was full of them. Every driver who had ever gone missing on these roads, every one of them was still in there, still sitting, still looking out, and every one of them, I realized, was in a window behind Denny. Denny was always in the 3rd window back, always the same seat. He was the closest one to the front, closest to the door, as if the bus had put him there on purpose, as if he was the bait. He had been dead 6 months. He was the newest one on the bus. On the 8th sighting, this was the night of October 22nd at a rest stop near Metropolis, Illinois. Denny did something he had not done before. He mouthed a word at me through the glass. I couldn't hear him. The windows of the bus are thick. There was 60 feet of parking lot between us. But I could see his lips move clearly, unmistakably, and the word he mouthed was one syllable, and I knew what it was. Please. He mouthed it once. Then he waited. He watched me from the window. His expression did not change. I sat in my cab with both hands on the wheel, and I thought about what please meant. Please could mean please come with me. Please could mean please save me. Please could mean 1,000 things. It could also mean please don't get on. I could not tell which. I have thought about it every day since, and I still cannot tell. His face gave me nothing. His face was the same tired face he had in the last year of his life, when he was trying so hard to be okay and not quite making it. And please was a word he had said to me 100 times in 100 different situations, and every time it had meant something different. I thought about getting out of the truck. I thought about walking across the lot. I thought about asking him what he needed. But I remembered what Ward had said. The bus asks you a question, and the world, if you're lucky, gives you an answer. And I remembered that the bus had now asked me its question 8 different ways, and the world had given me 8 different answers, and the answers had been my mother's phone call, a bruise on my hand, Ward himself sitting in his booth at the Flying J, a list of 3 names, photograph of Denny and me on Kentucky Lake, my mother's hand under mine on the porch, 11 names from microfilm, and a road sign that wouldn't photograph. 8 answers, all of them pointing the same direction. Stay. I did not get out of the truck. I did not walk across the lot. I put my hands on the wheel and I looked at Denny in the window and I shook my head. Slow, side to side, the way you shake your head at a child who is asking for something you cannot give. Denny kept looking at me. Then slow, he nodded. One nod, a small one. Like he had heard me, the door of the bus closed. The engine pitch changed. The bus rolled out of the lot. I watched it until the taillights were gone. I sat in the truck for a long time after, longer than I needed to. I was waiting for something. I didn't know what. At 4:17 a.m., my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize. The message was 3 words, one more time. I sat in the cab and I stared at the screen. I tried to reply. I typed, "Who is this?" The message didn't send. My phone said message failed to deliver. I tried again. Failed. I tried calling the number. The phone rang once and then cut off, and the screen went black. When I turned the screen back on, the text message was gone. There was no record of it. My Messages app showed only the conversations I'd had that week. The unknown number I'd tried to call was not in my recent calls list. But I had seen it. I had seen it. One more time. I drove home to Paducah in the dark. The sun did not come up for another 2 hours. I understood that on the 9th sighting, whatever happened next, I was going to have to make the final choice. And I was not yet sure what that choice was going to be. I did not drive for 4 days after the text message. I stayed at my apartment in Paducah. I took Biscuit on slow walks around the block 3 times a day. I called my mother every evening. I drove down to Calvert City twice and sat with her. I went to the Flying J, and I sat with Ward Meacham in his booth, and I told him everything. The photograph on the shoulder, Howell Hollow Road, the passengers I had matched to missing persons, the nod from Denny, the text message that had vanished. Ward listened the way he always listened, without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I've never heard of a nod. Not from any of them." Darlene didn't nod at me. She smiled, but she didn't nod. "That's new," I said. "What does it mean?" he said. "I don't know, son. I really don't, but I want to tell you something. I have thought about this bus for 42 years. I have turned it over in my head 1,000 ways, and the thing I keep coming back to is that I do not know what it is. Nobody does. The drivers who got on never came back to tell us. The drivers who didn't get on, we have our theories. Mine is that it is a kind of door, a door that only opens for grief. And whatever is on the other side of that door, whatever home means to it, I cannot tell you if it is good or bad. I can only tell you that the ones who go through the door do not come back, and that the ones who stay get to live the rest of their lives." He looked at me across the booth. "Holden, the bus is going to come one more time. You saw that? One more time, and then it is done with you, one way or the other. It is done with you because either you get on and you go, or you don't, and it moves on to somebody else who is grieving. That is what it does. It does not chase forever. It asks and it waits for an answer, and then it takes the answer and goes." I said, "What do you think the right answer is?" Ward looked at his coffee for a long time. He said, "I think for me the answer was no. I think for every driver I have known who was faced with it, the answer was no. I think for Denny on the bus, if any part of him is still himself, which I do not know, I think he would want you to say no." He looked up at me. "But I will tell you something, Holden. The man who drove that bus the first night it came for me in 1983, I think about him sometimes. I think about whether the whoever he was that was driving the bus was once a driver like me. I think about whether he had lost somebody and had gotten on and had become the driver because that was what getting on meant. And I think, if that is what it is, then there is somebody up there on that bus right now driving, somebody who used to be a man. And that man is maybe every time the bus goes out, hoping that this time nobody gets on. Because if nobody gets on, maybe he gets to stop driving. That is not something I have ever said to anybody, Holden. I am saying it to you because I do not think you are a man who will get on, and I do not think you are a man who will spread this story around in a way that hurts other drivers. But I think about him, the driver, and I think about what he wants, and I am not sure the bus and the driver want the same thing." I said, "You mean the driver might be on our side?" Ward said, "I mean, the driver might be praying every night that we say no." The 9th sighting came on the night of October 26th. I had not gone back to work. I had no reason to be on the road. I had stayed at my apartment for 4 days with the doors locked and the curtains drawn. Biscuit had slept on the foot of the bed each of those nights. At 3:11 a.m. on October 26th, I woke up because Biscuit was growling. She was standing at the foot of the bed, facing the bedroom window, the fur on the back of her neck standing up. I had never heard her growl before. She was 12 years old. She was a sweet dog. She did not growl at the mailman or at raccoons on the porch or at anything. She was growling at the window. I got up. I did not turn on a light. I walked to the window and I looked out through the edge of the curtain. My apartment is on the second floor of a small building off Jefferson Street in Paducah. The window looks out on the parking lot and the street beyond. It is not a street the bus should have been able to reach, but it was there. It was parked at the curb directly in front of my building. Lights on, engine running, home placard lit. Denny in the third window back, his face tilted up toward my window. I looked at the clock on my nightstand. It said 3:13 a.m. I had 20 minutes. I went to the kitchen. I put on coffee. I did it out of habit. I don't know why you make coffee when the red bus is outside your window, but I did. I sat at my kitchen table with the coffee cooling in front of me. Biscuit had followed me. She sat at my feet, still growling low, her eyes on the front door. I took my wallet out of my pocket. I took out the list, Mom, Trina, Biscuit. I took out the photograph of Denny and me on Kentucky Lake. I laid both of them on the table. I thought about what Ward had said, about the driver, about whoever was up there in the driver's seat of the bus, hoping every time that nobody would get on. I thought about Denny, about the nod, about the please. I thought about my mother, who at that moment was asleep in her bed in Calvert City, who had no idea anything was happening, who was going to wake up in 4 hours and feed her cat and water her, plants the way she had every morning for 40 years. I thought about all of it for a long time. It felt like a long time. It was probably not very long, maybe 10 minutes. At 3:27 a.m., I put on my coat, I put on my boots, I put the list and the photograph back in my wallet. I walked to the front door. Biscuit followed me to the door. She did not try to come out. She sat on the hallway rug and she watched me. I knelt down and I put my forehead against hers and I said, I'll be back in a few minutes, Mitt. She licked my nose. That was the library getting bigger. I stepped out of my apartment. I locked the door behind me. I walked down the stairs and out the front door of the building, and at 3:31 a.m. I was standing on the sidewalk in front of the red bus. The bus was idling. The door was closed. The home placard was lit. I walked up to the door. I put my hand on it. It was cold. I could feel the idle of the engine in the metal. I did not knock. I did not ask to be let in. I just stood there with my hand on the door and I waited, and at exactly 3:33 a.m. the door hissed open. I did not step up. I stood on the sidewalk with my hands at my sides and I looked up into the bus. I could see the driver now. The angle from the sidewalk was different than the angle from my truck cab had been. I could see past the handrail, up the steps, to the driver's seat. There was a man in the seat. He was middle-aged, maybe 50. He was wearing a gray work shirt with a patch on the pocket that might have said a name, but the light was wrong and I could not read it. He had a beard. His hands were on the wheel. He was looking at me. His eyes were not black, they were human eyes. Blue, I think, though again, the light was bad. He looked like somebody who had been tired for a very long time. I said, I'm not getting on. My voice was steadier than I expected. I said it clearly. I said it like I meant it. I said it because Ward had told me that the bus needed an answer, and I wanted there to be no confusion about what my answer was. The driver did not move. He did not speak. He just looked at me. Then, slow, he nodded. It was the same nod Denny had given me at the rest stop in Metropolis. Small. One movement. An acknowledgement, I said. Is Denny okay? The driver was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. His voice was low. It was tired the way his face was tired. He said, "He is as okay as any of them are. He is not in pain. He does not want for anything. He is waiting," I said. "Waiting for what?" The driver said. "For you to let him go." I did not understand what he meant at first. I looked past him, down the aisle of the bus, to the third window back. Denny was there. He was looking at me. His expression had not changed. Behind him, in the other windows, the other passengers sat in their seats and looked out at the Paducah night and did not move. I said, "I don't understand." The driver said, "He got on because he wanted to go home. He does not know he is not home. He does not know he has been on this bus for 6 months. He does not know there is another place he could be going. He sees you every time we stop, and he mouths please because some part of him remembers you. But he does not remember what he is asking for. He is lost. All of them are lost. None of them can get off the bus on their own." I said, "Can they get off?" The driver looked at me for a long time. He said, "If you say his name out loud, right now, say his full name, say you love him, say he can go." I stood on the sidewalk and I looked up into the bus and I thought about everything Ward had told me and everything I had read in the microfilm and everything I had seen in 8 sightings, and I thought, this is the test. This is what the bus really does. It shows you your person. It asks you to get on. And if you are weak enough, you get on, and you become another passenger, another face in another window, another body in another seat. But if you are strong enough to refuse, the driver asks you for the real answer, which is not come with me and not stay away, but let them go. I also thought, or maybe this is a lie. Maybe the driver is the bus. Maybe saying Denny's name is the real trick. Maybe the moment I say his full name out loud, something takes him in a way that getting on the bus never would. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about Denny Mound please through the glass. I thought about his single nod at Metropolis. I thought about how he had always, all his life, hated being made to wait for anything. How he had paced the living room as a kid, waiting for me to come home from work. How he had stood on the porch of the trailer the last day I saw him and looked in that moment like he was waiting for something he could not name. I made my decision. I said, Denny Vaughn, his full name, first and last. I said it clearly, out loud, on the sidewalk of Jefferson Street in Paducah, Kentucky at 3:34 in the morning. I said, "I love you. You can go, Denny. You don't have to wait for me. I'll come home a different way. I promise." The light in the third window back flickered, just once, like a candle in a draft. Then Denny smiled. It was the first time in 6 months I had seen him smile. It was the smile he used to have, the real one, from before the pills, from when he was 15 years old and drawing maps in his notebook and naming the back roads. It was a smile that belonged to somebody who was, for the first time in a long time, not afraid. He raised his hand. He waved at me, small. And then the third window back was empty. The driver watched me. He did not smile. He did not nod. His face did not change, but his shoulders, I noticed, came down a little, like a man who had been holding them up for a long time and could finally let them rest. He said, "Thank you." I said, "Who are you?" He looked at me for a long moment. He said, "My name was Carl Polar. I drove for Greyhound out of Evansville from 1961 to 1971. I got on this bus in 1972. My wife had died. I have been driving ever since." I said, "Can you get off?" Carl Polar said, "I don't know. No one has ever asked me to. No one has ever said my name." I said, "Carl Polar, you can go. You don't have to drive anymore. I'm letting you go." He looked at me for a long time, longer than he had looked at me before. Then his eyes filled up with tears, and he nodded once, and he reached up and he pulled the lever that closed the door, and the door hissed shut, and the bus pulled away from the curb and rolled slow down Jefferson Street toward the river. I watched it all the way to the corner. Just before the bus turned, just as the taillights swung across the stop sign at the end of the block, the interior lights of the bus went out, every window, all at once. Dark. The bus turned the corner. I did not see where it went. I stood on the sidewalk for a while. Then I went back upstairs to my apartment. Biscuit was waiting at the door. She did not growl. She wagged her tail. I knelt down and I held her for a long time. My phone rang at 6:08 a.m. It was my mother. She was not crying this time. She said, "Holden, honey, I had the strangest dream. I dreamed your brother came to my kitchen. He sat at the table with me. He told me he was sorry for everything, and he told me he was okay now, and he told me to tell you he loved you. And then he got up and he walked out the back door. I was going to call you as soon as the sun came up, and then the sun came up, and I realized I had been waiting for hours to call you. Does that make sense?" I told her it made sense. I told her I had had a similar dream. I drove down to Calvert City that morning. I sat at her kitchen table. I drank coffee with her. We did not talk about the dream again exactly, but we talked about Denny for the first time in a way that was not all grief. We talked about his maps. We talked about the summer he had been obsessed with the Beatles. We talked about the first time he had ever caught a fish at Kentucky Lake when he was 6. We laughed. I had not laughed with my mother in 6 months. When I drove home that night, for the first time in a long time, I did not think about the road as a place something could come out of. It has been 14 months since the night I stood on Jefferson Street and said my brother's name out loud. I did not go back to Long Haul. I called Barb at Wilcox Freight and I turned in my notice. She took it gracefully. She said she had been expecting it. She said, "You take care of yourself, Holden. You come get a coffee with me sometime." I took a job driving local, short haul runs around McCracken County for a produce wholesaler. I am home every night. I see my mother twice a week. I have lunch with Ward Meacham at the Flying J every other Saturday. He is 74 now. He is slower than he used to be, but he is still in his booth every morning, and he still drinks his coffee black, and he still knows every road in the Ohio Valley. I asked Ward once if he had ever heard of a driver getting off the bus. He said no. He said that was new, too. I do not know if Carl Polar really got off the bus. I do not know if he was resting somewhere now, or if somebody else took his seat, or if there never was a driver and I had been talking to something wearing a driver's face. I do not know if Denny really got free that night, or if I did something else. Something I will not understand until I am old and it is my turn. I have thought about it every day for 14 months. I still don't know. What I know is this. My mother sleeps well again. Biscuit is still alive, 14 now, very slow, very gentle. My sister Trina and I have started calling each other every Sunday. I have started drawing a little in a notebook. Not maps, just small things. The tree outside my window, Biscuit asleep on the rug, the way the kitchen looks at sunrise. Denny used to draw in a notebook too, back in high school. I think he would have liked that I'm doing it. I do not miss him less. That's not a thing that happens. I miss him exactly as much as I did on the night he died. But I miss him differently now. The missing is not a wound anymore. It is a room in the house. I can walk into it. I can sit in it. I can walk back out. On the nights the missing gets bad, and there are nights, I take out the photograph from Kentucky Lake. I look at Denny's face in it. I remember that the last thing he did on the bus was smile. I remember that the light went out in his window. I choose to believe that was him going somewhere. I choose to believe it. I am making this recording because the red bus did not stop running after the night it pulled away from my apartment. I know this because 3 months ago, a woman named Lenore Hatch, a long-haul driver out of Metropolis, Illinois, 52 years old, who had lost her adult daughter to a car accident in June, did not come home from a run. Her truck was found at the closed rest stop at Eddyville. The keys were in the ignition. Her coffee was still warm in the cup holder. Ward told me about it. He had known her. He had tried to reach her the week before, to tell her what I am telling you now. She had not answered his calls. Somebody is driving the bus now. I do not know who. I do not know if it is Carl Poehler back in the seat or somebody else. I do not know if the bus goes looking for new passengers or if it just appears, the way it always has, on the long-haul routes through western Kentucky and southern Illinois at 3:33 a.m. to whoever is grieving and lonely enough to see it. But I know it is still out there. So if you are driving nights, if you are running the interstates between Paducah and Nashville, or Paducah and St. Louis, or any of the long, empty stretches of the Ohio Valley, where the towns thin out and the radio goes to static, if you are running those routes on the overnight leg, and you have lost somebody in the last 6 months, and you pull into a rest stop at 3:30 in the morning and you see a red coach with home on the destination placard pull in beside you, you listen to me. Do not get on. If your person is in the window, don't get on. If they're calling to you, don't get on. If the door opens and the driver is looking at you and you feel the pull, and you will feel the pull, it is real. It is not in your head. It is the strongest thing you will ever feel. Don't get on. Stand on the ground. Put your hand on something real. Your wallet, your keys, a photograph, anything you carry. Think of the person who is still alive and still waiting for you. Say their name out loud. Yours, theirs, somebody's. The sound of a real name in the real world will pull you back. And if you can, if you are brave enough, if the door is open and the driver is looking at you, say the name of the one you lost. Say you love them. Say they can go. It might not work for everybody. I do not know. I only know what worked for me. On a sidewalk in Paducah, on the 26th of October at 3:34 in the morning. My brother's name was Denny Vaughn. He was 27 years old. He drew maps when he was a kid. He died on September 14th in a trailer behind my mother's house. I loved him. I love him still. He is not on the bus anymore. That is the only thing about any of this that I am completely sure of. Thank you for listening. Drive safe. Stay home.